Everyone, welcome. I am Peter A. DeLuca, aka the Pop Culture Pope. You know who I am. We're talking Star Wars and we're getting into the dirty. We're getting into the nitty gritty. We're not just doing every single Star Wars film, except for one Ewok movie and the holiday special, but we're also doing the commentary and we're discussing the fractions in the culture and the impact it has on you and me and individuals who are deeply impacted by the work of George Lucas. And look, everyone, I know we want to talk about The Rise of Skywalker, but this documentary, The Prequels Strike Back, is the third greatest Star Wars documentary ever assembled. This Bradley Whitamaker guy, he's got a long last name. He's not even on Twitter. That upsets me because I would like to tweet him. I don't understand how these people don't have a Twitter presence. I do, by the way. You can find me at AKAPAD. You hear that theme music, let's just jump right into it because we have to discuss it. Did I butcher that guy's last name? It's Weatherholt. Bradley Weatherholt. And, just going through his IMDb, this is our filmmaker. This is our visionary behind this piece. It looks like he's probably someone that went to film school and got some work, and he really hasn't done much past 2016. That's upsetting because I think this guy's talented. He opens this documentary with somewhat of this flashback of him as a kid watching the Star Wars movies, and he says something where he maybe watched some 50, 60, 80 times. It's some ridiculous number. I tried to connect to that, and I'm just like, I didn't watch those movies that much when I was younger. I was into a lot of different things. I was eclectic then. I'm eclectic now. Look, your pop culture pope, your boy over here, can only do as much as I do when you're eclectic, and you do have ADD and you do embrace it. This is why I branded myself the eclectic one. But so the previous documentary was The People vs. George Lucas, and it was this examination of what George Lucas did with the special editions, removing the original versions of Star Wars from the culture and the impact, the shockwave of the prequels and just the overall disappointment, and the people just feel like he robbed and hijacked their childhood. That's completely ridiculous. If anyone tells you that, I think anyone trying to connect how they feel about Star Wars to their youth is just ridiculous. Okay, because we never remember things the way we think we do. We don't. I'm sorry. I don't subscribe to that. If that's one of your baselines, we probably can never find some common ground. I believe adults look back at their childhood with admiration and they pick and choose. And that's it. And we walk away from the horrors and we embrace the good stuff, which is good. That's, good mental health. It's good to have a short-term memory to like bad things that happen. So a lot of this hyperboil about in our latest documentary, our latest episode 273, was just adults howling at the moon and crying about the prequels. And this documentary came out in 2016. So in 2000, we have Revenge of the Sith, ending the prequel trilogy. 5 years later, we have The People vs. George Lucas, a commentary, it's a documentation on where the Star Wars culture was post prequel trilogy. And now, a couple years ago, 3 years ago, leading into the release of Force Awakens, we have this. Now, this is a generation of kids that grew up watching the prequels. And it's important. It really is. Because as children, they did not dislike this movie. They liked it. The idea that Star Wars is made for children is completely ridiculous. It's hard for me to take people seriously when I hear them say that. You look at the lines of Star Wars New Hope from 1977. It's all adults. And everyone in line for Star Wars Phantom Menace were adults. So, what are we doing here? People have passed it on to their children, but a lot of kids first discover Star Wars through the prequels. And I feel like the films themselves, the saga itself, especially 1 through 6, has a different impact, a different meaning. I've been saying impact way too much, but it has a different meaning when you watch them in sequential order. And if you watch them in this idea that they're great and they're good, you probably won't enjoy them. If you sit down and watch them for what they are, and they're just like fun, silly, goofy movies, with various levels of quality, various moments, basically inconsistent. I mean, the only one of the entire batch that's consistent is Empire Strikes Back. And, there's even leaps within that narrative. So, we have a generation that grew up, okay, just thinking these are movies. And the first gen, we'll call it the first Gen 1 of the Star Wars fanatics, labeled the prequel generation as just, they don't get it, they're dumb. It's a battle line. And post Rise of Skywalker, people are now looking back at the prequels and saying, hey, no one really likes this new trilogy. At least, and they make these caveats for the prequels, but they'll say at least the prequels are coherent. At least we kind of know what's happening in them. At least we know what the plot is. At least they have an end point. They have a crescendo. They have a build-up. Like a lot of the events from Revenge of the Sith were set up in Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Attack of the Clones was set up in Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. They do flow into one another. And a lot of these things, they make these concessions. And this is blowing a lot of people's minds. What side's correct and what side's not, that's not for me to determine. I'm merely commentating right here on the effects. So, post Rise of Skywalker, these are your fractions. I think there's 4 fractions. I might add another one because I'm doing this off the top of my head. Fraction 1, the normal people that just watch it and they like it, and Star Wars is better than most science fiction movies. That's your general audience. Then you have your loyalists, your original trilogy loyalists. And then you have your prequelists. And now we have the new trilogy-ists, okay? Or the Rilo-ists, which is fascinating. And none of these groups, none of these fractions can agree on anything. And they're at war. And, the general audience doesn't care. They're just moving on to the next thing. Like me, I'm moving on to Bad Boys for Life because I can't wait for that movie that opens this week. I cannot wait for Bad Boys for Life. So, this is, though, getting back to this documentary. This is my style of documentary. I think it's well made. They have a lot of good people, a lot of good insight, a lot of good quotes. It goes into the mind of what people like about these movies. They go into the mind of the ring theory, storytelling, or I'm thinking of string theory, but there's a symmetry within these movies that they identified that Lucas maybe was purposely doing. It has a lot of theories and good stuff behind it. Well intended, well researched, well executed. This guy should do a follow-up. He's got to do something post Rise of Skywalker. He should just continue making these documentaries. I believe this was crowdfunded. He's got to get back to it. It's been 4 years now. It's been a little too long. I wish him the best, and I'm hoping he continues this conversation, because this documentary has exact realistic intent. There's a control of the culture now that is operating through YouTube, and that culture is daily updates, and the news and the significance of that erodes every single day. The clock ticks, okay? It continuously gets worse. The commentators continuously get tired. This is how the 24-hour news cycle hurts. The 24-hour news cycle whittles away at the significance, and the YouTube is doing that with the Star Wars commentary and Star Wars conversation. This is as important to the Star Wars lore mythology than any of the movies. And I urge all of you to watch it. I am happy and I am proud to have this as one of my episodes for AKAPAD's Audio Audacity podcast. And look, you were waiting for episode 275 will be Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Let's get to this, cause I got some unpopular opinions about that movie, and we're going to discuss it. And I'm going to highlight to you when I saw the movie and kind of some of these other things that happened to me and where my life was when I first saw Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Everyone, I love you. Thanks for joining me, and let's rock and roll.